The New Mexico sun painted the land gold as cattle baron Clinton Hale rode along the ridge of his sprawling ranch. With more land than most towns and a herd so large it moved like thunder, Clinton had earned his reputation, powerful, feared, and untouchable. But he was also 41, unmarried, and whispers had begun. "He can't keep a woman 'cause no woman can keep him," one ranch hand muttered. "He's got money but no heart," another said over poker. Truth was, Clinton didn't care much what folks thought, until his banker came knocking. "Expansion needs a name like yours joined to someone else's power," the man said, sliding papers across Clinton's oak desk. "That's politics," Clinton grunted. "It's marriage," the banker corrected. "To the Coulter girl, old ranching family. Her father passed last spring. She's plain, but they've got influence." Clinton stared at this photograph. The woman had tired eyes, a thin mouth, and wore no adornment, not even a smile. The caption read simply, "Eliza Coulter." He didn't need love. He needed land and stability. So Clinton said yes. The letter went out the next morning. A week later, Eliza Coulter arrived by wagon, wearing gray and dust. She stepped down in front of the Hale ranch house, grand as any governor's mansion. Clinton emerged, boots thudding, hat in hand. She looked up at him, not timid, not awestruck, just quiet, observant. "You're taller than I expected," she said. "You're early," he replied, surprised by her calm. "I don't linger where I'm not welcome." Clinton frowned. "I never said you weren't, but you never said I was." The wedding was set for 10 days later. Until then, she'd stay in the guest room, eat with him when invited, walk the land when permitted. But what Eliza Coulter did next wasn't wait. She studied the ranch. She spoke to the workers, not like a lady, but like someone who understood the sweat on their brows. She helped the cook, fixed a broken fence, spoke Spanish with the vaqueros. And by the end of the week, the ranch hands whispered again, "She ain't much to look at, but Lord, she knows how to lead." One night, Clinton found her sitting alone in the barn, reading an old ledger. "You're in my books," he said. "You're in my land," she replied. He looked at her, unsure whether to be insulted or impressed. Maybe both. "You always been like this?" he asked. She didn't smile, but her eyes glinted. "You mean useful or ugly?" He stiffened. "That ain't what I meant, but it's what you were thinking," she said, standing. "And that's fine, Mr. Hale. I didn't come for your affection. I came for your partnership. If you want a woman who'll play pretty and sit quiet, send me back." She brushed past him. He didn't stop her. He couldn't. But something strange happened after that. Clinton Hale, the cattle baron of Red Hollow, couldn't stop thinking about her. The woman he never wanted was becoming the one he couldn't ignore. The following morning, Eliza Coulter rose before the roosters. By the time the ranch hands stirred their coffee and stretched their backs, she had already fed the hens, taken inventory of the barn tools, and reorganized the pantry behind the cook's back. Clinton watched her from the porch, arms folded across his chest, still in his undershirt. "She don't stop, does she?" murmured old Gus, the foreman beside him. "No," Clinton said flatly, "she doesn't." At breakfast, Clinton expected her to ask about dress fittings or table linens for the wedding. Instead, Eliza handed him a handwritten report. Feed quantities, mule schedules, calf birth rates. "You need to double your oat orders by fall," she said without lifting her eyes from the page. He blinked. "You're not here to run my ranch, Eliza." She met his stare. "Then you should tell someone to do it, because right now no one is." He didn't respond. She left her coffee untouched and walked out into the rising sun. By the third day, the ranch was moving like clockwork. The workers didn't just respect Eliza, they followed her. Not because she was charming, because she was competent. And Clinton felt it. He felt the shift. For years, he'd built walls of stone around his authority. Now she'd walked in, without force, without asking, and planted wildflowers in the cracks. That night, as the moon crept over the canyon, Clinton found her behind the barn. She was brushing the mule, an old thing most had forgotten. "You don't sleep much," he said. "Sleep wastes time." "You're not here to prove anything, Eliza." She stopped brushing. "That's where you're wrong." She turned, eyes dark and clear. "I'm not here to be your mistake. I'm here to be your equal. Or nothing at all." He took a step closer. "Most folks would call that pride." She didn't flinch. "I call it survival." The wedding date approached, and for the first time, Clinton wasn't sure what he was marrying her for anymore. Not just the land, not the alliance. Maybe, just maybe, it was her. One morning a storm broke over the range. Thunder rolled like hooves. The corral fence cracked. Calves scattered into the wild winds. While the men scrambled, Clinton rode out. And so did Eliza. She wasn't afraid of mud or lightning. She chased down 3 calves on her own, her skirt soaked and her bonnet lost somewhere in the sagebrush. Clinton saw her in the storm. Hair loose, boots torn, eyes blazing. And for the first time in years, he felt something. Not duty, not ownership, but awe. That night she stood dripping in the front hall, breathing hard, soaked to the skin. He took one look at her, then handed her a towel. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "That a compliment or a warning?" He chuckled, a sound no one had heard from him in years. Maybe both. But as the sun rose the next day, so did the past. A letter arrived from Eliza's cousin, and in it, a secret that could burn everything she had built, because no one, not even Clinton Hale, knew who Eliza Coulter really was. Clinton Hale wasn't a man easily rattled. He'd survived cattle rustlers, flash floods, and 2 gunfights before the age of 30. But the letter he found resting on the mantelpiece that morning, addressed to him in neat feminine script, made his stomach twist. It was sealed with wax and bore a name he hadn't heard before. Eleanor Grace Coulter. He slit the envelope open with the edge of his pocket knife. The letter inside was short, but the truth was sharp. "If you are reading this, it means Eliza has not told you her real name, nor why she changed it. My cousin was not born a Coulter, nor was she raised to marry men like you. She ran from a scandal in Missouri, one involving a fire, a death, and a judge's verdict that vanished along with her. Marla Whitley." Clinton set the letter down, his hands tightening. The woman he had just started to admire, maybe even trust, was hiding something much bigger than a strong will and plain face. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he watched her at the dinner table, setting bread beside stew like nothing weighed on her. Watched her nod to Gus in the yard, as if she'd been born here and not somewhere ghosts still whispered. Watched her laugh softly with the cook over a batch of ruined cornbread. And every gesture made it worse, because it all felt real, and he didn't know what to believe. 2 nights later, the storm returned. Not in the sky, but in his voice. He met her in the stables, where she was tending to a lame foal. "You lied," he said flatly. She looked up slowly, her face unreadable. "About what? Your name, your past, Missouri?" She didn't deny it, didn't flinch, just let out a breath long and slow. "Are you going to ask why?" "I shouldn't have to." "But you do." She stood, wiping her hands on her skirt, eyes steady. "My father was an alcoholic. My mother left before I could walk. I was raised by an aunt who cared more for her reputation than my skin." She paused. "There was a man. He tried to marry me, through force, not courtship. I fought. He fell. He hit his head on the hearth. Died instantly." Clinton's jaw clenched. "The judge knew his family," she added. "They called it a tragic accident. I called it a chance to leave." Silence filled the barn. Only the foal's slow breathing broke it. "You could have told me," Clinton said, voice hoarse. "I could have," Eliza agreed. "But would you have let me stay?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Later that night, he found himself staring at the letter again. And he realized something. Eliza Coulter wasn't her real name, but the woman who wore it was realer than anyone he'd ever met. The next morning, she was gone. Left nothing behind but a folded note. "You wanted a partner, not a scandal. I won't bring shame to your name. Thank you for giving me these days of dignity. Eliza." But Clinton Hale wasn't the kind of man who let the only person who ever stood equal to him walk away. Not without a fight. Not anymore. Clinton Hale hadn't chased anything in years. Money came to him. Men respected him. Women, well, they came and went, none of them leaving a dent. But Eliza had left more than a dent. She'd left a hole. And now she was somewhere on the open road with nothing but a borrowed horse and a name that wasn't hers. He rode out at dawn. Didn't take a tracker. Didn't send a telegram. Just followed the trail like instinct. Like her soul had carved its own road into the desert. He found signs. A boot print too small for any ranch hand. Crushed sage where someone sat beneath the stars. The broken stem of a wildflower tucked inside a mile marker. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting to be found. 3 days in, he reached a rail stop called Perdition Hollow. It was the kind of town that didn't ask questions. One saloon, one chapel, and too many shadows. He found her in the livery, brushing down a mule like it owed her answers. She didn't turn when he dismounted. Didn't speak. Just said, "I wondered how long you'd take." He stepped forward, boots scuffing dry hay. "I read your note," he said. "Every word." "I meant it." He nodded. "I know." She finally turned, dust on her cheeks, eyes hard. "You came all this way for what, Mr. Hale? Forgiveness? Closure? You have your ranch, your land, your name?" "I came," he interrupted, "because you're not just some arrangement." She blinked. "I came because you're the first thing in years I didn't build. I just wanted." She stepped back. "I lied to you." He stepped forward. "You survived. There's a difference." Her voice cracked. "I'm not who they say I am. And I'm not who they made me either." Silence settled, thick like evening heat. Then Clinton took something from his coat, a bundle wrapped in soft cloth. She hesitated, then unwrapped it slowly. Inside, a gold band. Simple. No diamond. Just solid, honest metal. "Marry me, Eliza," he said. "No contracts, no cattle, no banks breathing down my neck, just me." She held the ring, lips trembling. "You sure?" He grinned. "I've never been more unsure in my life. That's how I know it's real." She didn't cry. Eliza Coulter never cried. But when she stepped into his arms, she buried her face in his chest for a long, long time. They rode back to the ranch at sunset. The trail behind them long and tired, but ahead, a new season waited. One built not on bargains, but on something earned. When Clinton and Eliza rode back into Hale Ranch, it wasn't with fanfare. No one waited with flowers or music. Only Gus stood near the gate, arms folded, a toothpick between his lips. "Well," the old foreman said, eyeing the dust-covered pair, "didn't expect to see the both of you riding back alive." Clinton dismounted first. "Neither did we." Eliza met Gus's eyes squarely. "Good morning." Gus raised an eyebrow. "Morning, Mrs. Clinton cut in. "She's Eliza Hale now, or will be in a week." The silence that followed wasn't long, but it was heavy. Then Gus nodded once. "I'll make sure the boys know." He walked off, didn't look back. Inside the house, the air felt different. Everything Eliza had touched weeks ago remained where she left it. The logbook on the desk, the repaired fence plan, the unfinished jar of peach preserves on the pantry shelf. But something had shifted. This wasn't a guest returning. This was a mistress of the house. Clinton stood behind her as she unpacked her small bag. "You don't have to prove anything anymore," he said gently. "I know," Eliza replied, placing her worn gloves in a drawer. "But I still will." She turned. "Not for them." She stepped close. "For me." That evening the ranch hands gathered outside the bunkhouse, whispered, watched. A few nodded politely when she passed. Others avoided her eyes. In town, the news had already reached every saloon and general store. The cattle baron married the Missouri girl. The plain one. The one with a past. But none of it stopped her. Eliza went back to work as if nothing had happened. She organized winter rations, helped repair a broken axle, cleaned out the grain silo alongside the hands, shoulder to shoulder, sweat and all. And slowly respect returned. Not just from the workers, from the land itself. A few days before the wedding, Clinton found her outside at dusk, staring out over the southern ridge. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She didn't turn. "Whether they'll ever see me as enough." He stepped beside her. "They don't have to." She looked at him puzzled. He reached for her hand. "Because I do." The wedding wasn't grand. Just a dozen chairs beneath the old sycamore near the barn. Claire, the cook, made the cake. Gus cleaned up enough to be mistaken for someone half his age. And when Eliza walked toward Clinton in a simple white dress, her face glowing, not hidden, no one whispered. No one mocked. They stood and watched. As the cattle baron, who once made deals with banks and buried his heart under ledgers, took the hand of the only woman who ever made him speechless. Marriage didn't change the weather. The wedding was bright, full of quiet joy and honest smiles. But the next day, the clouds that had once hung heavy over Red Hollow simply stayed gone. Stayed. No rain, no shade, just dust and heat. The land began to crack. The river that once curled near the ranch like a silver ribbon had shrunk into a dirty thread. Cattle bellowed in thirst. The hands whispered as they leaned on dry fences, watching the sky like it owed them something. Clinton tightened water rations. Eliza began to organize rotating pasture lines, keeping the weak animals closer to what was left of the spring. They worked together, shoulder to shoulder. But even love couldn't make it rain. Then the townsfolk began to murmur. They remembered Eliza's old name and her old story. Whispers bloomed in dry places. She brought Missouri's bad luck with her. She cursed the ranch. "I heard the fire she escaped wasn't an accident." The words floated into town like embers, and into Clinton's ears. One evening, after a long day of hauling barrels and tracking runoff, Clinton stepped inside to find Eliza sitting silently by the window, face pale in the moonlight. "They said it again, didn't they?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. "I can go," she whispered. "No," he said. "I don't want your name to dry up with your land." He knelt before her. "You're not my drought, Eliza. You're the only thing growing." But what neither of them expected was a letter. Again, from Missouri. This one not from a cousin or gossip, but from a lawyer. To Mrs. Eleanor Coulter Hale, you are hereby informed that a man named Jebediah Tulliver has emerged, claiming he was present the night of the incident in Jefferson County, and that he has information that exonerates you entirely. You are advised to return to Missouri to testify before Judge Harlan. If cleared, your name will be legally restored. Eliza stared at the letter like it was written in fire. Clinton read it beside her. "Is this what you want?" he asked after a long silence. She shook her head. "I don't know." A name meant survival to her. A new name meant a second life. But the chance to clear her old one? That was something different. It wasn't just justice. It was truth. "You want me to come with you?" Clinton asked. She looked up at him, a strange emotion in her eyes. "No, I want to go alone." He didn't protest. He simply cupped her face in both hands and kissed her once, long and full of all the things he couldn't say. The next morning she rode out before sunrise, and as the ranch shrank behind her, the desert opened in front. Eliza Hale was riding not away this time, but toward herself. Missouri was colder than Eliza remembered, not in temperature, but in silence. The train pulled in just past dusk, its whistle shrieking like a warning. The station was smaller than it once seemed. The platform hadn't changed. Neither had the eyes of the townspeople who passed her by with second glances and stiff mouths. Eliza Hale, once Eleanor Coulter, had returned, and the ghost came with her. She checked into the boarding house under her real name, Mrs. Eleanor G. Hale. The landlady paused at the sight of her identification, then stiffly handed over a key. Room 4. Welcome back, Miss Coulter. The words carried more weight than a bullet. In court the next day, she faced a face she never thought she'd see again. Jebediah Tulliver, once her neighbor, now a thin, leathery man with a nervous mouth and darting eyes. He fidgeted on the stand. Told the judge everything. I was drunk that night, yes, sir, but I remember it plain. That man, Thomas Greeley, he came at her. She shoved him. He slipped. Hit his head. It wasn't no murder. It was just fear. The courtroom murmured. Eliza sat still, hands folded, chin lifted. The judge nodded slowly. You were wronged, and wrongfully judged by omission. He paused. Do you wish to reclaim your birth name, Miss Coulter? And that's when Eliza finally spoke. Voice calm, firm. No, Your Honor. Heads turned. She stood. I didn't build my life under that name. I found myself as Eliza Hale. And I've learned that the name on a birth record means nothing if the life behind it isn't earned. The judge blinked. You understand you are legally cleared? Yes. But choose to remain who you became? Yes, sir. That's the only part of this I ever chose. That night, she walked the old street where she once ran bleeding from her aunt's front steps. She paused at the corner where the fire had taken everything, and she whispered only once, I forgive you. Not for them. For her. 2 days later, she boarded the westbound train. No luggage heavier than a book and a letter addressed to my husband. In it, she wrote, Clinton. I faced it. Not for the law. For the girl I buried when I fled. She's gone now. I'm not Eleanor. I'm not Coulter. I'm Eliza Hale, and I'm coming home. And far from the smoke and rail of Missouri, back in Red Hollow, Clinton Hale stood on the ridge watching the sky. Not for clouds, but for the trail of dust that meant his heart was riding home. Eliza returned just after dawn. The sky above Red Hollow was streaked with red and gold, but the earth beneath it was brittle, parched, and anxious. She didn't need to ride far into town to know something was wrong. The dry season had snapped into full-on drought. Wells were coughing up dust. Streams ran dry. Cattle had started dying. And worse, Clinton Hale was gone. She galloped to the ranch, heart-pounding, breath shallow, only to be met by Gus at the fence. He's out riding the eastern perimeter, the foreman said, removing his hat. Looking for signs of water. Took 2 hands with him. Been gone 2 days now. Eliza swallowed hard. And no one's seen him? No, ma'am. She paused, then turned her horse again. But before she could reach the trail, Claire, the cook, called out, Eliza, the town council's asking for you. She blinked. Me? They said if Clinton's not here, you're the one who can lead. You got the head for it. They've seen it, even if they won't admit it out loud. Inside the old town hall, the atmosphere was tense. Farmers, ranchers, businessmen, no one sat comfortably. We've got 5 days of water left, said a man in suspenders. Less if the herd keeps drinking like they do. There's a spring east of the mesa, Eliza offered. I found it on our land chart weeks ago, but it's deep, needs blasting to clear. Blasting costs money, someone snapped. And waiting costs lives, Eliza replied, cool but firm. They argued, but she didn't shout. She drew a plan, allocated wagons, assigned men, and by the time she left, even the oldest rancher tipped his hat as she walked past. She wasn't just Mrs. Hale anymore. She was the woman who knew what to do. That night, Eliza lay awake, not out of fear, but out of purpose. The town needed her. The ranch needed her. And Clinton, wherever he was, needed to come home. The next morning, the blasting crew rode out. By noon, the first trickle of water bubbled to the surface. Cheers echoed through the canyon. Eliza stood tall on the ridge, eyes wet but steady, not because they found water, but because she helped them believe they still could. And just as the sun began to set behind the hills, a figure appeared on horseback at the crest of the trail. Tall, dust-covered, hat low, horse limping slightly. Eliza froze. Clinton. He slid off the saddle like a man who hadn't slept, then looked up and smiled, rough and real. You hold everything together while I was gone? He asked hoarsely. She stepped forward and took his hand. No, she said. I held it together so you had something to come back to. He didn't answer, just pulled her close and kissed her like a man who had finally come home to something he no longer had to build or chase, but simply deserve. It had been 3 weeks since the water returned. The spring east of the mesa now ran steady, not strong, but enough. The cattle had stopped dying, the workers had stopped whispering, and Eliza Hale had finally started breathing easy again. She and Clinton sat most evenings on the porch now, silent, satisfied. But peace in the west never stayed long. It came on a Tuesday, hot, windless, the kind of day where even the flies gave up. Clinton had ridden to check the southern troughs. Eliza was alone in the house cataloging supplies when she heard it, a faint, desperate cry. At first she thought it was a coyote pup, but when it came again, weak, human, trembling, she dropped the ledger and ran. Behind the barn, near the old hay wagon, a bundle shifted under a frayed blanket, and inside it, a baby, barely 6 months old, sickly, covered in dust, and alone. Pinned to the blanket with a rusted brooch was a torn scrap of paper. "Her name is Ruth. I can't care for her. She deserves better than me." A mother who couldn't stay. Eliza didn't hesitate. She lifted the child to her chest, heart racing, voice low and steady. "It's all right. You're safe now. You're safe." She rocked Ruth gently, even as tears slipped down her cheeks. Tears she hadn't cried even in court, not for herself. But now for this little girl. Clinton returned that night to find Eliza standing in the nursery that had never been used, holding a child that wasn't hers, yet already was. He stepped inside, boots quiet on the floorboards. "Found her?" he asked softly. "No," Eliza replied, eyes still on the sleeping infant. "She found us." They didn't speak of what to do for days. The sheriff looked into the matter, asked around. No one knew of a missing child. No one came forward. And after a week, it became clear. The baby had been left with intention, not abandoned, entrusted. Eliza watched Clinton closely. He wasn't a man of easy words, but he fixed the crib, found milk, asked Gus to build a toy rocking horse. And one night, as Ruth cried and Eliza paced the parlor with her on her hip, Clinton walked over, held out his arms and said, "Let me try." She handed him the baby, hesitating. Clinton held her close to his chest, swayed slowly, and softly began to hum. An old cattle trail tune Eliza didn't recognize. Ruth stopped crying. Just like that. Later, as they stood together near the fire, Clinton asked, "You ever think about having one of our own?" Eliza looked up. I do." He nodded, then looked toward the nursery. "But I also think sometimes family doesn't begin with blood. It begins when someone stays." And so Ruth Hale became part of the ranch, part of the family. Not by law, not by blood, but by something much rarer in the West. Choice. It started with smoke. Thin at first, barely a smear across the northern horizon. The kind of haze folks in the West often ignore, until they can't. By the second day, the air turned copper. Ash rained lightly across the ranch like snow from a darker world. The trees whispered, not from wind, but from warning. And by nightfall on the third day, Red Hollow was burning. The fire moved fast, faster than men could ride, faster than warnings could reach barns and back houses. Gus woke the ranch with one shout. Clinton was already pulling on boots. Eliza had Ruth bundled and cradled against her chest before the smoke reached the front porch. "Take the west trail," Clinton shouted over the rising wind. "Toward the rock shelf. It's the only place it won't jump." "What about you?" she called back. "I'll catch up." She didn't believe him, not fully. But she trusted him, so she ran. Flames licked the sky behind them like wolves on a scent. The ranch hands rode with what cattle they could save. Others herded frightened horses through the scrub. Eliza rode with Ruth against her chest, her heart thudding louder than the hooves. The fire chased them with the rage of old sins. It wanted to take everything. At the ridge they reached the shelter, a clearing of stone, the ground blackened long ago by another older blaze. Safe, but barely. Eliza scanned the horizon again and again. No sign of Clinton. The other said he stayed behind for the final herd, for Gus, for the water barrels, for anything he could grab. But Eliza knew better. He'd stayed because that's who he was. A man who stood between the danger and the ones he loved. Night fell. Still no sign of him. Ash covered her dress. Ruth whimpered in her arms. And then, through the smoke, a silhouette appeared. Horse limping, rider slumped. Eliza stood, didn't breathe, until she saw him straighten. Clinton, alive, carrying not just himself, but Gus, draped over the saddle like a sack of feed. He made it to the clearing, then collapsed. They pulled both men down. Gus would survive, a broken rib, burned hand, but he'd live. Clinton, smoke in his lungs, skin blistered, shirt singed black. But when Eliza knelt beside him, he opened his eyes and whispered, "Told you I'd catch up." She laughed through tears. "Idiot," she murmured, kissing his soot-covered brow. "Beautiful, stubborn idiot." The fire didn't win. The next morning it had passed, left behind its scarred fences, scorched hillsides, and the bones of what used to be buildings. But the heart of the ranch, the people, the bond, the purpose, remained. Eliza stood at the edge of the ridge with Clinton beside her, Ruth in her arms. Behind them, the workers began rebuilding. And in front of them, across the ash-covered plain, was their future. Not easy, not guaranteed, but theirs. Clinton turned to her and asked softly, "Was it worth it?" She didn't hesitate. "All of it," she said. "Even the pain?" "Especially the pain." She leaned her head on his shoulder, because it made everything that came after feel like miracles. And so the story of the woman with no name and the cattle baron who thought he'd never love didn't end in fire. It began again in its ashes, together.